Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. You're in the right place, the perfect place, if you're looking for a wellness check-in team whose goal is to remind you to think about wellness and encourage you to make wellness a priority. It all stems from my book, Accidentally Well.
This is episode 28.
A territorial acknowledgement improves allyship with Indigenous people. As part of a reconciliation process, we make our podcast from lands located within the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We acknowledge the presence and traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land. We are treaty people, responsible to honor the original caretakers and to serve as stewards for the land. This is Let's Be Well Together podcast, and it's John with Sammy.
Hey.
So, I want to start another kind of series on our What's on Your Mind discussions, Sammy, and I just want to set it up a bit. This is kind of the first one. I often talk about the bullet points, the facet activities, the category activities.
Yeah.
And the concept is for each of us, we have areas of wellness. And I think it's really worth it to actually start listing for each area the actual activities that you can do to nourish wellness in that area.
Right.
And there's lots of reasons for it. And we talk about that more generally. So what would be nice is if we can start talking about, for us, what are some of the activities that nourish wellness for our areas? And what would be great, actually, is if some of our listeners would join the conversation. And the easy way to do that is go onto Instagram, let's.be.well.together, and leave a comment about what's an area of wellness that you like, important to you, and what's an activity that fosters it. You know, if we find some comments like that, we'll talk about them sometimes.
Definitely.
So today, we haven't actually talked a lot on our show about intellectual wellness, which is a huge topic for me. It's really important. It's a long story, but I'm having a hard time finding people for interviews on that, but that's kind of a funny side story that I won't get into. I'll start, and then I'm going to ask you what maybe something is that nourishes wellness for you on the intellectual side.
Sure.
And the key is I don't see this as knowledge-based. I don't see this as IQ. Of course, it's important to learn, to always be learning, to be inquisitive and all that stuff. But for me, intellectual wellness, what nourishes it is exercising your mind, activating your mind.
Yeah.
So for me, one of my favorite things to do is brainstorm. I just love brainstorming. So like, for example, if I'm at home and I'm trying to fix something. So I'll give you a quick example. The dishwasher, the part that spins, it was attached in a certain way and the piece of plastic broke.
Right.
So it's got to pop into this piece, has to pop in. So I'm thinking, okay, well, the only way I'm going to fix this properly is to order a part. It's going to take a few weeks.
Yeah.
But I sat and I looked at it for a while and I realized that as long as I can find something that would attach the two sections together, it would probably work. I'd at least give it a shot.
Yeah.
And then I remembered that I just had gone to the store and I bought some of those zip ties, like mini zip ties.
Right. Yeah.
For something. And I'm like, well, maybe like how hard could it be to try it? So I took a couple zip ties and I attached the thing and it worked perfect.
There you go.
It's still up there and it's still working like 6 months later.
Wow. Yeah. You're a DIYer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love it. Like that's just a kind of a silly example, but I just, and at work, like I have countless times at work.
Yeah.
Where I have to deal with a litigation problem or an argument the other side makes.
Right.
And there's another situation where brainstorming is so much fun. And I really feel like it exercises my mind.
Definitely. Yeah, I could see that. Like brainstorming helps me too, I think. But when I hear the word intellectual, I definitely get like a little nervous sometimes.
Oh,
yeah.
How come?
Because I know I'm an educated, smart person, but there's still like that little voice in my head saying like, I'm not, or I could be better, or I could learn more. And that almost stops me from doing stuff like that. I want to DIY stuff, but it almost stops me because I'm like, why would I do that? And I know that's just my own insecurities, but sometimes, I'll be quieter in an intellectual conversation if I feel like I have nothing to add because I'm afraid of, making myself look stupid or feeling stupid or embarrassing myself, anything like that. So it's definitely something that I want to try to get better at and just going for it and being like, I'm going to use a zip tie to fix my dishwasher.
Well, yeah, or even just demystify it a bit. Like, so for example, like Sheila and I, quite different in so many ways.
Yeah.
And even though I'll get in trouble for saying this when she listens, like, I don't think Sheila considers herself, quote, intellectual in that way.
Right.
She's not bookish.
Yeah.
She has a hard time spelling some words.
Yeah, same. Me and Sheila are very similar.
But she contributes so much to the discussions, and she opens so many doors to my mind.
Yeah, like sometimes that's needed to ask the questions that maybe you wouldn't always think of. And I feel like me and David are similar, where sometimes when you have that intellectual side of, brainstorming and looking at all the facts before you go for something, sometimes you need someone that's like a little bit more of an outside thinker or outside of the box.
Yeah, well, let me push you a little bit too. Though. Like, I still feel like you're being a bit defensive, as if somehow intellectual is superior, but other people can help too.
Yeah, no.
But I'll tell you an example. Like when I first met Sheila, it always struck me, like, she doesn't overthink things.
No. Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Right? And it always struck me that she would often have the right answer almost immediately. So I would, we heard about something that happened, and let's say there's kind of a moral question.
Yeah.
Do you think the person did the right thing or not? It was never anything dramatic. So I would start going through my intellectual exercise. I have read philosophy and blah, 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 blah. And sometimes I thought her way was better. She's just like, it's wrong. Like, you don't need to think about it. You just know that that's wrong.
Right. Yeah.
She intuits it. Right. And I feel like there's a lot of people who come up with great contributions in ways other than this kind of ivory tower universe. And so, like, I've often actually, because I am one of these kind of ivory tower people, very educated. So I love watching shows when the people who don't go to university make fun of the people who do go to university, calling them eggheads. And because they're kind of right.
Yeah.
And so,
for sure.
So anyway, you should never not want to contribute.
No, I know that. I know that definitely. And, there are so many different types of intellectual, educated people in the world that have so much to contribute. And, for me and stuff, like, I just need to be more confident in those situations of just, saying my opinion. And maybe it's wrong. Maybe it's right. Maybe it has nothing to do with what the conversation is. And I just got to go for it.
Why don't we on our show try and make a point of switching what the word intellectual means?
Yeah.
So we're going to just use it to mean exercising our minds.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
using our minds. And so, like, I'm just looking at my list for a second. The first bullet in the bullet point list I have in my book, it's never stop learning, read, listen to podcasts, watch documentaries, engage in discussion.
Yeah.
Anybody can do that.
Definitely.
And you're being intellectual. So let's forget about this intellectual in the sense of the professors who all think that they need a degree before you can be considered worthy of having a comment in the discussion.
Yeah, yeah.
So what about you? Can you think of anything that does help you exercise your mind?
For sure. Well, in that bullet point you just said.
I just threw on the ground.
You just threw away? No,
nobody can see it, but I just threw it on the ground because I didn't want to put it on the table and make it rustle.
No, it's okay. I remember. But one of them was the intellectual conversations, or not intellectual, but just conversations that make your brain think. And that's something that I really thrive in, is having those conversations, especially with people that I feel comfortable around, where we can kind of like go back and forth. And after those conversations, I have one friend that we have a lot of these every time, we FaceTime. She lives in Montreal, so we don't see each other all the time, but we'll, talk for 3 hours, and it'll just be about current things that are going on in the world, or what we think about this or what we think about that. And I know it's a safe space.
And do you often have different perspectives?
Sometimes me and her tend to be like pretty much on the same side, but she does sometimes push me in a way to think differently. And it's something that I really respect and admire of her, is that she's able to, if someone has a different perspective, not get angry about it or try to push her opinion. She'll more ask questions. And it's something that I'm really trying to do better at, is asking questions when someone has a different opinion, instead of, putting my wall up and being like, you know what? No, we're not talking anymore. I don't want to talk about that.
That's the great thing about being inquisitive. And it's a big part of my job to listen.
Yeah.
Listen to what people are saying. So a lot of times if let's say I have a case and you're on the other side and I get to ask you questions. So you're a witness.
Yeah.
There's certain points I want to make. So part of me is trying to get those points out, getting you to admit these points.
Right.
But it's a mistake to have a list of questions and just try and ask you them and try and get you to answer them the way I want. But if I'm listening to you, you're going to give me an opening.
Definitely.
You're going to say something that's like, aha.
Yeah.
But only if I'm listening.
Yeah.
One of the things you said there, though, like earlier you said, so sometimes I don't really, I'm a little leery about saying anything because I might come across in a certain way. That says to me, don't quite have that trust with the people who are in the room.
Yeah.
But if you have the trust with people in the room, you feel free.
For sure. 100%. Definitely. Like, and like I think that comes from childhood, being in school and being a young girl. If you spoke too much or if you spoke too loud, you were seen as like pushy or bossy or know-it-all. And I think that kind of stuck with me for a little bit. And it's something I'm really trying to push past, that, and it's okay to be a know-it-all. It's okay. Yeah. It's okay. Well, so in a specific way, like it's fine. Like,
yeah. And for someone like me, like I want to hear other perspectives. I might not agree with you ultimately, but I want to hear it.
Yeah.
And so it sounds to me like the only way I can do that is make you feel like you're in a safe space.
Yeah, definitely.
And actually listen to what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference. Like when you hear the word like know-it-all, it's someone who's just constantly pushing their opinion on you.
Right.
But it's so important to be able to listen and understand other people's perspectives. Because that's also something that I find I'm really good at that with people. If they have a different opinion, I'm actually way better at listening and understanding, kind of seeing their point of view. But when it's someone who like I care a lot about, or, they're just very close to me and they have a different opinion, it's like I have that emotional reaction of how could you not?
Yeah, sometimes it's
think
like
what I'm thinking.
How can you? I don't get it.
Yeah, like how are you thinking that?
And that's fair.
We've known each other for 20 years. Like you just think that you have the same opinion, but then when they don't, it's like a little bit more, hurtful or anything.
And it's hard I can't really go right off that, but in a similar vein, like there are a lot of times when somebody says something that's totally unexpected.
Yeah.
And 30 years ago, I would have been like, in your face, like you're bomb. But now for a lot of times, I'm like, and then I don't say anything to them, but I go away and I think about it. I'm like, how did they get there?
Right.
And then sometimes I'm like, oh, they got there, but I still think they're wrong. And sometimes like, I kind of missed that point.
Yeah.
Like I don't always learn something from what they said, but the experience of going away and thinking about what they said, I always learn something about myself.
Definitely.
So it's really cool.
It is really cool. Yeah. And that's something David really likes doing too, is having conversations with people of like the complete opposite opinion of him, because he likes to to learn and he likes to like exercise his brain, versus to me, it will sometimes exhaust me to the point of like where I can't, because it feels like arguing versus like debating. And I feel like there's like a thin line between what a debate is versus what an argument is. And sometimes I miss that.
Yeah, well, there's time and place for debates.
Definitely, yeah.
But so
always.
The next segment right after we're done here is Expanding Mind interview. And I have to say I've been so loving doing the interviews, because what I always do is I get a topic, I write down a few points that I want to cover, but then I just sit and listen.
Yeah.
And it's been so amazing to hear these different things. And there's time after time where I actually missed a point during the interview.
Right.
But then when I go to edit it, or when I listen to the whole show, I'm like, wow, what an amazing thing I just heard.
Yeah.
And it's only because I asked a question, because something like popped into my head. So, okay, so we'll wrap it up, but conversation, all these things, let's take the snottiness out of intellectual. Let's exercise our mind. And we're finding out how rewarding it can be if you can be a trusted person as part of a conversation, and people like Sammy will open up more and we'll learn more.
Exactly.
Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds. Today's interview is in the area of spiritual wellness, and we are back with Reverend Michiko Bown-Kai, and we introduced them in an earlier episode. As a quick recap, Michiko Bown-Kai is a minister with the United Church of Canada. They are passionate about social justice and creative expression. Over the past decade, Michiko has engaged in ministry in many forms. They are always excited to learn more about cultures, languages, and nature. You can find Michiko biking, Highland dancing, or befriending as many dogs as possible. And Michiko, today I'd like to talk to you about gender and spirituality. Just for some context, in earlier shows, one of our earliest, we started a discussion about gender when we interviewed Scott Williams of Spectrum Waterloo Region. I learned, for example, that in the same way I should avoid asking a person's preferred sexual orientation, I should also avoid asking what a person's preferred pronouns are, because asking about preference suggests that it's a matter of choice, rather than acknowledging how a person feels or who they are. And in your case, I think the pronouns are them and they, if that's right?
That's correct.
Okay, so, and my pronouns are he and him. Can you help us understand, what does the term transgender mean to you?
Sure thing. Let's jump right in. So the term transgender can be sort of understood in two parts. Gender we're familiar with, and trans meaning sort of in its root to cross over. And so we actually see this all the time. It's the same root that we see in words like transportation or transfigured. And so the idea is that to identify as transgender, you have a gender that has crossed over from the gender you were assigned at birth or perhaps raised and socialized with to the one you identify with presently. And that's actually the same thinking that's used behind the term cisgender. So cis, spelled C-I-S, means on the same side of. So that term would be helpful when describing someone who was given or assigned a gender at birth and then raised and still uses the same gender identity.
One of the points that came clear from Scott's interview that I really appreciated from Scott's interview was even when I went into the interview, I think I was compartmentalizing things too much. I was trying to get an explanation where everything would fit in the right compartment. And he did a good job helping me understand that there's a lot of gray area. We have to get used to more of the gray area. And so that was one theme. And a second theme was that you mentioned cisgender. And one of the points I made with Scott was I think some people would be surprised that there's a word to describe aligning with the sex, or with the gender that you were designated at birth, because people would say, I don't need a word for that. It's just, quote, normal. And we're starting to hopefully get to the point where we don't talk about normal anymore, because we're just talking about people's experiences. So some people are cisgender and some people are transgender. Is that making any sense to you?
Definitely. And I have to say, in these conversations, I understand this desire, especially when it's from a place of good intentions and respect, to think, yes, I want to figure out where exactly everything fits and makes sense and what definitions to memorize. But yeah, there is a lot of gray area, because so much of this is what we're unlearning as a society, what we're each personally unpacking. So many of these conversations are wrapped up with culture, even sort of local context. And so I think what I've come to learn over time is that I love the gray area of these conversations, because it teaches us to be curious, to ask questions, and it just creates space when we stop making assumptions about others that we've been trained to make our whole life, and instead just make space. Instead, we get to learn and see so much about people around us.
One of the things that also came through, I didn't appreciate how much the binary, so man, woman, binary, was influencing everything I thought about. It's really hard to break out of that. So for example, when there's discussion about more than two genders, I still have challenges trying to figure that out. But that is the challenge, opening up the language, opening up the discussion, getting used to gray area. And I think ultimately, on my little soapbox for a second, I think that if we can get more descriptions, a better understanding, opening things up beyond the binary, it's exciting, because we can describe people's experiences in a lot richer way, because we'll see life in a richer way.
Yeah, and I've appreciated that too. Like, as someone who identifies as non-binary, you mentioned earlier that my pronouns are they and them. It's led to opportunities to have conversations with people where they kind of say, like, how do you know? And then I can say, well, how do you know that you are a man or a woman? What makes you those things? And then it sort of helps all of us have just a deeper, richer sort of investigation into gender roles, especially because so much about gender roles are defined by patriarchy that's harmful. So it can be quite freeing for anyone to engage in those conversations.
Yeah, that's something that I'm starting to see. It is freeing. And I really like your thought about curiosity. I'm a very curious person too. So it's an interesting conversation. So then if we shift gears a little bit, how do you see trans experience and relating to spirituality?
In a couple of ways. I think one of them is just to name that, like, within society as it is, trans people experience oppression. It's a world that's not made to affirm or support trans people by and large, the most part. And there's a lot of different forms of discrimination that are experienced by trans people. And so I think that experience of having to confront those challenges on a regular basis impacts you. It raises questions, I think, around suffering, authenticity, how to engage in the world in ways that are compassionate, but also, ensure that you are safe and respected. And all that work of navigating the world, I think, is really, it teaches you a lot of spiritual lessons, for sure. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a very personal topic, and so I can only really speak to what I have experienced. But I think that process of figuring out who you are, choosing to live your life for yourself authentically, even when you know perhaps there's a cost attached to it, really helps you develop a sense of inner strength. And I think that's really key to spirituality.
Are there any, and again, I like the way you're talking about your own experience, and that's a point we make often on our show, that we and our guests are coming from our own experiences to share them. And the hope is by sharing experiences, we're opening up conversations, we're getting people interested in topics, and they'll learn more. In your experience, are there common ones that people in the trans community face in connection with the Christian faith?
Yeah, so as someone who has been in ministry now for about a decade, a significant part of the work that I have done has been around LGBTQ plus experiences within the church, especially the United Church of Canada. And unfortunately, the stories that I have heard from so many trans folks is that church has not always been a place of safety or belonging. And there are many churches out there that have quite active policies around ensuring that trans people are not welcome, especially as ministers and in terms of leadership. But I think in many ways, churches as institutions echo a lot of the other barriers that exist in a lot of institutions in terms of trans inclusion.
And faced with those experiences, what are some of the things that you can do or have done to try and either help trans people or address issues that trans people address?
Yeah, so some of the work that I have done has been, for me, doing the work of looking at the Bible, engaging theologically with what reasons people may have to say that we should exclude trans people, and finding actually that the message that I've seen in the Bible is one of love and radical hospitality, and that is something that should be extended to all, including trans people, of course. So doing that work within my community to use the tools and challenges that we have as a way of sort of wrestling with those barriers has been important. But I really think that this work around being aware about trans experiences is something that can happen at any place and any time. Like, you can really ask your HR department at work whether or not they could plan to do some kind of training for the staff around gender identity, to, a conversation like this, but with more in depth, or even if there's an organization that you volunteer with, to just say, how is this place welcoming for trans people? Do we have trans people involved in the organization? If so, what is that telling us about the ways that we're making space for trans folks?
A quick point, just while I remember, so Spectrum Waterloo Region, I think Scott said that their organization will go to businesses and give that type of discussion that you were just talking about to help explain some of the terms and concepts and help people better appreciate things. What about, if I could turn just slightly to wellness and more generally, as opposed to just spiritual wellness, do you see a relationship between gender identity and wellness and health more generally?
Yeah, and I think it would relate back to what I was saying earlier about experiences of oppression. For a lot of trans people, especially trans youth, when they come out, they are kicked out of their homes. We know that statistically that LGBTQ plus people are overrepresented in terms of youth shelters, and that oftentimes there's barriers in terms of finding jobs. People who come out or transition at work often get fired, or just have a hard time landing secure employment. So when you have issues around having basic things like housing and finances, then that certainly impacts your ability to have a well-balanced, healthy life. If you're just dealing with those stresses around core needs, the challenges certainly show up in terms of mental well-being, but of course is so connected to everything else.
And then if we turn back to spirituality, you mentioned that you did some study of the Bible and to look for some passages and whatnot. Is there an example that you can think of how it speaks to things like love and acceptance that would apply to trans people as opposed to the kind of pushing them away from the church and the religion?
I mean, I don't really want to launch us into a Bible study here because I'm aware of time, but I will say that it's about sort of tracing this narrative that's throughout the Bible, the Old Testament, New Testament, about this idea that God's work sort of shows up in most unexpected places and unexpected people, and that God continuously has a concern for justice for those who are downtrodden, oppressed, and outcast in society. And so if we look at what trans people are experiencing today, I would certainly understand the way that God does have that concern for justice for trans people.
Well, I think you're right, we are a little bit up against time, but that's also an eloquent place, I think, to stop. So thanks for that. So then, remember the last question I ask every show. We asked the last time you were here, and you talked about routine sometimes and rest at others. But so let me ask the question again and see if things have changed. So if you think about different areas of wellness in your life, and examples we talk about are things like physical, spiritual, social. Can you think of one right now that's lacking a bit? And if so, can you think of even one activity you could do to try and foster wellness in that area?
Oh gosh, I'd say for me right now, what feels very obvious is the social element. It's really easy, I think, for work to take over, especially in ministry when you work all hours, you work with volunteers when they're available. So making sure you carve out the time to enjoy the company of others. And especially during winter, finding COVID-safe ways to enjoy other people's company, especially when you're like maybe not always excited for more screen time. That for me feels like the challenge. So I'm very grateful for the chances I am having to connect with people, but I think, yeah, that's something I would want to pay attention to a bit more.
Yeah, just for context, even though this episode will probably be launched sometime in May or June, we're recording it early in the new year. So we're still in COVID. And I actually went to a restaurant for a gathering just before the Omicron variant hit. Things were opening up and I was able to go to a restaurant for a get together. And it felt so amazing. Like it was incredible how different it felt to see people face to face and smile and laugh and talk. And then of course we all get shuttered back in our houses again.
Well, I'm glad you had that opportunity. It is so good for the soul to enjoy a company of good friends.
I agree. And on that, thanks very much again for your time. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
I'm Cameron, and welcome to another installment of The Adventures of the Starving Artist. Today is an online lesson day for me, which is bittersweet. On the sweet side, it's nice to not have to sit in Friday traffic, which is probably one of my least favorite things. On the not-so-sweet side, it's never quite the same teaching online as it is in person. But it's all good. I get to jump instruments like 3 times, and that always keeps me on my toes, so that's fun. Coming up this weekend, I've got another jam booked with my buddy. You might remember I jammed with him last weekend as well. And last time, we had thrown some song ideas around and bounced them off each other a bit. This weekend, we're hopefully going to be developing a couple of those into tunes. Maybe not fully fledged out with lyrics and stuff, but at the very least, get the structures down. Now, last weekend I was playing bass, but I'm thinking this time I'm going to switch to drums. And that kind of brings me to what I want to talk about today, which is a quick dive into the way music works, at least in my brain. So I'm glad I've put the time into learning music as a language, and not just learning an instrument or two. Because learning music as a language makes it way easier to swap instruments, and it makes picking up new instruments far less intimidating. There's still technique to consider. You know, I'm by no means a fantastic bassist or a drummer, but I can definitely get by because I can understand what the music, the overall thing, is doing. Different instruments lend themselves to different ways of communicating musical ideas. So, if you think about it like this, a Ferrari and a pickup truck can both get you from point A to point B, but each driving experience is going to be completely different, right? That's kind of the way I look at different instruments. For instance, a bass, it's a very supportive role much of the time. It really is a bass. Similarly, drums, very foundational, especially in a big, like a rock band setting, and big band, but a rock band setting. Along with bass, those two make up sort of the glue that holds everything together. Most of the time, right? There are always exceptions, but this is like generally speaking. The same way English has different parts, you know, verbs, nouns, adjectives, adverbs, and then all the nitty-gritty parts like transitives and blah, 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 participles, past participles, all that stuff. Music has ingredients too. And the most basic ones are beat, rhythm, melody, and harmony. For the uninitiated, a quick breakdown. Beat, that's the thing that you could stomp your foot to and nod your head to. The old 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Rhythm, that's when things move, but it doesn't pertain to the notes. It's just the timing of their movement. So for instance, a rhythm could be da 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 da. If you combine beat and rhythm, you can have a pretty cool thing to groove to, right? Da 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 da. See what I'm saying? The other ones, melody and harmony, those actually involve pitches or notes. So melody, that's the thing you would sing along to, or if a guitar is taking a solo, they would take a melody, right? Harmony, that's all the other notes supporting the melody. Now, for the most part, drums don't get to use melody or harmony. They focus on beat and rhythm. Now, if you think about it, of course, different tom drums make different sounds. A snare drum is totally different from a kick drum. And all the cymbals sound different, right? So you get this fun playground of different sonic textures and feelings. As an aside, and my bandmates can vouch for this, my favorite part of the drum kit is an absolutely obnoxiously filthy China cymbal. Do you know that SNL bit with Christopher Walken and I could use a little more cowbell? That's me, but with more China cymbal. And before all the drummers out there yell at me about tuning their drums and the pitches involved, yes, I'm with you. I hear you. But most of the time, you're not going to be playing scales or chords on a drum kit, unless, you know, you've got a synth pad hooked up or a xylophone or something like that. All this to say, I'm looking forward to playing the drums this weekend. It's been a while for me. I miss it a lot. But also because, like I said earlier, it communicates musical ideas in a different way. So I'm excited to see where it takes us. Anyway, that's the ramble. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful week. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
We could really use your help. Please spread the word about us and importantly, connect with us on our Instagram or Facebook page. We were hoping to start conversations not only with us, but between our listeners. That hasn't really happened yet, so help us break the ice. Don't be shy. Make a comment, share a thought. Tell us what activities foster wellness for you, in what areas. Let's connect.
Move that body like we're meant to do.
it has been decades since I went up to Algonquin Park with a group of friends. It was actually in high school, and we canoed and portaged and had just an amazing time in nature. And it's always something I think about, but I haven't done it in such a long time. I have friends who do it. And I'm here. We've already met Brad Mills. He talked about rock climbing. It turns out that Brad also likes taking trips in nature. So welcome back, Brad.
Hey, thanks for having me on again.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So why don't we start by just like, if you know, I'm sure you've done lots of different variations, but if you think of one of your last trips, what did you do in nature?
Sure. So actually my last trip was just a couple weekends ago. I went to a portaging trip up to Algonquin Park in sort of the northern part of Ontario.
That's amazing. So when you say portaging, I think of canoeing. Is that what you guys were doing?
Yes. So I should have said that before. Yes. It was a portaging canoeing trip for 3 days and 4 nights. Yeah.
And so for people who don't know what portaging is, so you go into a river or maybe a lake, and you get to a point where you can't go any further in the boat. So you literally pick up the boat and you carry all your stuff and you carry it to the next river, the next lake. Is that a fair description?
Yes, that is exactly it.
So how many times did you guys have to pick up the boat on your last trip?
So I went with a couple friends who were actually pretty new to the whole thing of the canoeing trips and the portaging. So we tried keeping it light for them with about only 3 portages, with the longest one only being about 500 meters.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yes.
And when you did that, so I remember we either had everything in the canoe when we walked or in knapsacks. I guess another option is you can do 2 trips. What were you guys doing?
So, we did a combination of double and single carry. So the single carry is just getting all of your gear in one go and doing the portage once. And then the double carry is splitting up your gear and then doing the portage in 3 trips, actually. But that can obviously add some time to your hike and your trip.
And did you guys do any camping, or was it a day trip?
Yes, it was. We were doing some camping on a few lakes out in Algonquin Park. So we stayed on Burnt Island Lake and Little Joe Lake. Each day was canoeing to a new campsite and then spending the night there and then canoeing to another campsite the next day.
And were they private campsites so that it was just your group, or were you part of a larger group of people?
Yeah, so it was a group of 4 of us. How the reservations in Algonquin work is a lake will have about, say, 7 campsites available, and then it allows 7 parties to book a campsite on that lake, and then it is a first come, first serve basis to get one of those campsites.
But if you get a campsite, you're on your own. Nobody's really close to you.
Nope. You might be able to see or yell at someone really far away, but yeah, you're pretty much on your own. No cell service, just you and your group of friends.
But it's a pretty special feeling that you're in this amazing place, the stars above you, a tent, and you're by yourselves and you're alone in nature. It's quite an experience.
It's one of the reasons why I'm out there, especially being up in northern Ontario and Algonquin. Just the remoteness and just the feeling of self-reliance, of having everything you're going to need to survive for a weekend or maybe a week on your back. It's just a very good and fulfilling feeling I get just from being out there and in nature and spending almost the whole day there.
Yeah. So what do you get out of it from, physically, mentally? What are some of the things that you enjoy about it?
So I like the solitude. I'm obviously with some friends, but I really like the idea that there could be no other person around you for kilometers and kilometers. And it's just you out in the wilderness. Gives you some time to reflect, just to kind of slow down and just kind of take in the scenery and just kind of how fast life can be in the city when you're kind of out in nature and everything just takes that much longer and that much slower to do. I just find that, you just really get to appreciate how fast and busy life can be in the city once I get out there.
It's good exercise too. And one of the things I remember, especially on, say, a lake as opposed to a river, which can run relatively quickly. I've canoed in parks, local parks, or on the Grand River here, and you see the rest of the world and whatnot. And it doesn't feel the same as if you're in Algonquin Park or somewhere like that, and you're on a lake and it's not wavy that day, and your canoe paddle is dipping in the water. and you're moving forward with your boat, you know, you're feeling your muscles working. There's something pretty magical about that. It's mesmerizing, but it's also almost like meditating. There's so much you can get out of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Kind of that feeling of not being exhausted, but just being a little tired and kind of worked over out in the wilderness and just kind of keep pushing on. It just, it gives you that kind of mental clarity and focus just to kind of push through some adversity. I really like it when I'm out there and that kind of thing happens.
Yeah. And to me, the air smells a little fresher, and right before I go to bed, and I sleep like a baby too.
Oh yeah. And actually one of my absolute favorite things, it's a little nostalgic. So kind of a bit of a memory for me is hearing some of the loon calls at night.
That's right.
Where I grew up in the cottage, we listened to them all night. So that is just a very nostalgic memory to me of hearing the loons go all night.
I just had an image and a memory. It's just amazing how it pops back. So, well, thanks very much, Brad, for coming on and telling us a little bit about that. It's a great way to move that body, and we appreciate hearing from you.
All right. Thank you very much.
There's a thought. Popped up while running. So much depends on perspective, and yet we can go our whole lives without noticing some perspective. And so I was out running today, and I think I've mentioned before that I've really gotten into the show how the universe works. I have no idea why, but I just find it fascinating. I also find it puts a lot of things in perspective when you think about the trillions of stars, how much time it took for the Earth to become Earth, and then life emerged and the rest of it. Anyway, for whatever reason, I always thought of the sun in our solar system, where the sun is just like sitting nicely in space, and it's sitting there, and the planets are all going around in a nice disk, and that's what's going on. Nice and calm, cool, collected. But that's not anywhere close to what's happening. The sun is barreling through space around a black hole at the middle of the Milky Way galaxy. And apparently the sun is traveling something like 720,000 kilometers an hour. And I looked it up, and the circumference of the Earth is 40,000 kilometers. So to give you some perspective, that's like going all the way around the world 18 times in 1 hour. That's how fast the sun is barreling through space. And planets, they're stuck by gravity, but they're not just like nicely going around in this one big disk. They're getting dragged along as they're going around the sun and kind of spiraling almost behind, maybe. Not really, it's going around, but we're also barreling through space. And I don't know how, I'm not sure that's a perspective that changed anything really important in my life that I made decisions about. But when I was out for my run, I was just thinking, wow, like I'm old and I didn't know that till now. I wonder how many other things I've approached with a certain perspective, but it's the wrong perspective. And maybe in some cases, it changed the way I looked at stuff in a not so good way. Interesting. It's me. Am I?
Yeah. Just let me say, flip side of the coin.
We found out that we were ahead of the curve on something in an article Sheila read. Sheila came across this article in a home design magazine, and it's called Furnish Your First Home Sustainably by Tamarisk McNulty Stevens. And the reason why Sheila read it was because we often talk about environmental. Mm-hmm. And this seems to say that there's a way to furnish your house in an environmentally sustainable way. But the other thing we thought was really cool about it is a lot of these things that it's suggesting were things that we just happened to do just because it's just the way it was our groove at the time.
Yeah. Now, I do find it interesting that it's talking about your first home, because I often find people who are getting their first home don't have the money, the ability to follow a lot of these rules. But like us, this is our last home maybe. So we could take the time and the thought and the money that you have to put into it to do this.
But still, this article actually is directed at millennials buying their first home. Mm-hmm. And I do think, like, for the very reason you're saying, that's the reason why I think it's great for people to think about it. Because some of these tips, what you're going to realize is it means it's a bit more expensive at times. Mm-hmm. And you're thinking, I can't afford it. But the lessons we've learned over the years is that you should afford it, because buying good quality, buying things that last is ultimately the cheapest solution long term.
Yeah, true. So shall we start with the first one?
Yeah, so let's start. So it's broken into 3 sections: furniture, appliances, and accessories. Yeah. And we'll chat about what they're saying and how it kind of
connects with us.
Yeah. So what's first?
The first one is furniture. And the first topic that I thought we could talk about is fewer items. So is it a need or is it just a nice?
The concept is a simple one. If you buy more products for your house, if everybody does that, then they have to create more products, and you have to use more raw materials, more trees, and more metals. So if all of us have fewer items in our house, then that helps the environment.
Right. And we have found that we actually like the less is more.
I guess if you were going to describe our look, it's kind of modern-ish and clean lines, timeless.
Timeless.
So we don't like a lot of clutter.
No.
So for us, that worked out nicely and we got lucky.
So think need or nice. The next one is invest in some pre-loved or used items.
So again, that's obvious how it helps the environment. If you buy something used, they don't have to take new trees and new metals and make something new.
Right. And they just said take the pre-loved antiques and fix them up and use your creativity to make it fit in with your design.
Now that one's a challenge for me because there's a certain look that I like, and it usually has to do with getting something new. But, But I think the message to me I'll take going forward is at least look.
Yeah.
At least take a look for some used stuff first. And again, especially don't be afraid to go places where they have quality used stuff.
Yes, for sure. Speaking of quality, the next topic is high quality. So it's not a bad idea to buy furniture that is a little bit more expensive, high quality furniture, because it is more durable. It lasts longer.
Yeah, definitely a Sheila and John life lesson has been, if you cheap out on the furniture, you buy a cheaped out couch, you're sitting in this pretty deep depression in the side corner and not very much time, and it's, or it rips. But meanwhile, if you buy high quality stuff, you actually save money long term because instead of buying 3 couches, you've only bought 1. This is the part that's tough, I think, for millennials and Gen Zs who are just buying houses, or anyone buying their first house. It's really worth it to buy quality.
Yeah.
And, something that's durable.
Less, like don't buy a lot, just buy a nice quality piece, a nice quality couch, and then you can go from there. Timeless. So timeless furniture is great because, you don't have to change it. You're not going in and out of the fads.
So if you're buying something that you think is going to last a long time, you should really look at it, take a good hard look at it and think, is this the current trend today?
And the great thing is that if you get the big pieces that are timeless, then you can make them fit the period of the fad of the time with a throw or with the,
You can use throw pillows.
Accessories.
You can use all kinds of accessories. You keep them, you're right, the main stuff you keep simple and timeless and quality, and then you change the other things.
Exactly.
And it's kind of jumping forward because we're not at accessories yet. But part of the thing that we did is we thought, let's buy all the major stuff that's timeless. Let's keep our walls a color that's timeless. As things change, we can get a different light fixture.
Right.
A different backsplash.
Yeah.
Different blankets.
A different throw, a different carpet. And again, this is great for environmental because you are saving the landfill because you're keeping this furniture, hopefully, for a lifetime.
Right.
So that's your goal. Okay, so now the next topic is appliances. This was interesting. So reduced energy. Obviously, we want to try and get appliances that are
energy efficient.
And
you'll see the Energy Star rating or whatever you call it. Like, have a look at that.
Right. But that's not the only thing you should be looking in for appliances, right? So support companies that prioritize environmental initiatives.
If I was going to do this now, which I haven't done in the past, I would do some searching to try and find out what I could about companies that are environmentally friendly.
Yeah, have environmental initiatives. So that's interesting. And don't cheap out. Get quality appliances.
That's another huge lesson that we've learned. So in our current house, we had the good fortune of moving in here where we had some money and we could buy good quality appliances for the kitchen. And I wish we had known that before. They're so durable and they're so efficient.
And you know what I find really interesting is the fridge. Actually, this gorgeous fridge that we bought, our vegetables last longer.
Right.
So it's another environmental thing, right? Like you're not wasting food.
I remember when we were buying it, the salesperson said, I know this is expensive, but they actually don't call this a fridge. They call it a food preservation appliance. And I'm like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
but it's so true. Like,
yeah, so true.
The vegetables last so much longer in this fridge than any other fridge we've ever had. It's mind-boggling.
It is. It is mind-boggling.
So how much money is that saved?
Yeah. So that's really great. Okay. And one more thing for the appliances is learn how to fix them. Like attempt to try and fix things or get someone in to fix it instead of just throwing them out and getting a new one.
Yeah, for sure. You want to get comfortable with the manuals.
Yeah.
I'm not the greatest. Like I have been able to fix a few things here and there.
Yeah, you're pretty good, MacGyvering.
But get comfortable with manuals, trying to fix things.
Yeah.
Get somebody good who's you can trust to fix it.
Yeah. And the last one is accessories.
Right. And here's where you can do something trendy. So right now, there's, who knows, maybe it's gold is in right now. Everybody's got gold handles on their doors.
Right.
And I'm sorry if you just got some because they're not going to be in style in whether it's 5 years or 10 years. We've already seen this come and go. But you can get that stuff for accessories. Have a little gold rim light fixture.
Right.
And what other kind of accessories can you get?
Well, in the article, it talks about rugs, getting nice throws and rugs, also supporting your local artisans and artists.
Yeah, because there's so many things like art and knickknacks. That's all stuff, or even throw pillows and all that stuff.
Exactly.
You can go to your local farmer's market or your local artisan stores, or there's all kinds of art shops.
Perfect. And of course, you can go into the vintage stores as well and get things there. But we actually find that we like clean lines for our house. So
we're lucky because, again, if less is more when it comes to sustainable and environment, we just don't like knickknacks. And so people often come into our house and
think that we're staging it.
They're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean what's going on? Well, is something happening? Are you selling your house? And we're like, why do you ask that? And they're like, because there's nothing on any of your counters. Like, look at your kitchen counter. There's only a coffee maker on it.
That's it. That's the only thing that we have on the counter. And I love it.
Yeah. So if you ever meet Sheila and let's say it's before mid-afternoon, if you give her a really good coffee, she just takes milk. You are going to make a fan pretty quick because Sheila loves her coffee so much so that you're allowed to leave a coffee maker on her counter.
Yes, you're allowed to leave a coffee maker and that's it. I don't like all the other appliances that you can have. So we're really careful on buying appliances, making sure that we have room to put them somewhere because I don't want them on the counter.
Anyway, it was a really cool article. And because it kind of dovetailed with our approach, that made us look smart. So we wanted to talk about it. Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own, and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct, or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way.
And that is the end of the show. And we'd like to welcome back Sammy. It's so nice that you're here today.
Thank you. I know it's been a while.
Yeah. So what have you been up to?
Yeah, I've been up to a lot. David's sister's wedding was 2 weeks ago now, which was awesome. It's at the Laura Mill, which is beautiful. It's where my brother also got married. So that was amazing. And he also had some family down from Wales, down, up, over. I'm not very good at geography, but somewhere from Wales. And it was really fun hanging out with them. That was my first time meeting them. So we got to go to the cottage, hang out with them. I taught them how to play spoons, which they've never played spoons before, and they loved it.
That's a tradition that we did all the time. Yeah.
I was like, you're at the cottage, you have to play spoons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Someone has to get hurt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we didn't play the tackle version, but we did play the just regular table version, and that was a lot of fun. And then, lots of cottage weekends that I've been to, and then next week going out to my friend's cottage. So yeah, lots of time in the sun. I feel like I'm very tan this summer.
Yes, you look a little tan.
Yeah, thank you. Taking that as a compliment.
And now, what's up with you, John?
It's amazing, actually. We're talking about going to cottages. Like, I always think that, of winter, right? And you can't even imagine any of this stuff. So we have to try and pack a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. So right now, I'm getting pretty excited. I mean, we're taking off for London on September 24th. That's not very far away. No. So that's really exciting. I had a little glitch on my training this week, so I had a bit of an Achilles tendon issue. So it was hard because you think, I know I can't stop running. I got to keep the distance going. But I actually took the whole week off until today. And then today I went out and it was brutally hot.
Yeah.
Unbelievably hot. And I don't do great in the hot and the humidity. So I cut my long run a bit shorter. It was still long, but I cut it shorter. And I was really relieved because my Achilles was okay. I kind of ran out of gas. But then today was one of the first days I should be using it more, but it was one of the first times I've enjoyed the pool. How about you, Sheila?
Yeah.
That is so true. I was watching you swim. Wasn't sure if you were going to go under.
Putting the goggles on and off.
Because I go in the pool every day. I make it a habit to try. But not much is happening for me this week. John and I will be celebrating our 35th wedding anniversary next weekend. So we're trying to figure out what to do about that.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so that's exciting. And we had Elise last week here. So that was really nice. Got to spend some time with her. And we'll keep swimming and gardening and
making the most of the Canadian summer.
Yeah.
Wishing it wasn't like wanting heat. Maybe I'm being too picky because I want it to be hot, but not this hot.
Oh, it's so hot. I was out gardening and I've never sweat so much in such little amount of time.
And this morning, was it this morning or yesterday morning? I went out to sit down at our table to have a coffee, and it almost kind of smelled like when we're down in Mexico or Dominican. There's just this kind of scent that's in the air in these tropical places. I'm like, what is going on? The world is changing.
It really is. Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah.
Okay, well, everyone have a fantastic week. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again next week.
That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.